Hello there guys, RMP792 here, and I haven't done a vlog in a little while, barring that tiny extra one where I did just a minute ago, where I was basically talking about answering the questions based on Sunrider, because, well, I was sick of getting asked. I think I'm going to have to close this curtain too a bit, aren't I? There we go. But anyway, so I figured I'd use this opportunity to do a little vlog and talk about a book I happen to like. I'm going to do this occasionally. I'm just going to occasionally talk about books that I think you should read. And this specifically is one of my favourite science fiction books. And it's this. It's The Forever War by Joe Haldeman. Now, this is actually the edition that has The Forever War, The Forever Free, and The Forever Peace all in one honking big book. But The Forever War is definitely the best of them, of the three. Because the Forever Free is very surreal, but it is interesting. It's definitely an interesting follow-up, but it is a very surreal one. Whereas the Forever War is definitely the better book, because the Forever War takes up that chunk of this whole collection. And Forever Peace is it rehashes a lot of the same themes, but does it in a different way. And it is an interesting read. But the Forever War is definitely the best of the series. So, what's it about? The basic principle of the Forever War is that humanity has started expanding out to the stars, and we've encountered a hostile alien species, known as the Taurans, largely because they were first encountered in the Tau star system. We have no idea what the hell they call themselves, and we don't really care because we're just going to kill them. So, it follows the story of a young man named Mandela, who is basically recruited into the United Earth Army. And he's part of the Elite Conscription Act, which is basically everybody they're sending out here has to have a minimum of a pretty high IQ. He's actually got a physics degree. And must be in excellent physical condition, because they're going to be fighting in places that are completely hostile to human life. They're literally fighting in temperatures of about 1 or 2 degrees above absolute zero. And if you're not aware, that's minus 250 odd Celsius, I think. I think absolute zero is minus 256, but I could be wrong. But anyway, it's literally 1 degree above the point at which no energy exists. It's kind of a fascinating concept, but. So they're basically all armoured up in this sort of incredibly tough power armour. And the most interesting concept that the book has, that makes it really interesting, is that because of the way they achieve faster than light travel, they basically accelerate to fairly substantial chunks of light speed slowly over time, and then throw themselves through so-called collapses. And the book's kind of vague about what they actually are, but it's implied that they're sort of collapsing stars or something of that ilk. But basically, and that sort of flings them out to somewhere else in the universe, and you can angle depending on... you can work out exactly where you're going to come out. But as a result, you get time dilation, so the further out you go, the worse it gets. Which means that after his first sort of tour of service, he comes back home to find that sort of 30, 40 years has passed, and the Earth has changed a hell of a lot in that time. And so he ends up being, pretty much out of the fact that he can't cope anymore, signing up for another term of service, in the agreement that he'll get deployed to a training position on their base on Luna. And so they assign him to this training post on Luna as one of the instructors, and then they immediately reassign him to frontline combat because that's urgently required. And it's pretty much implied that this is standard procedure. They offer them a job close to home, and then they immediately reassign them somewhere else. Which is a massive dick move, but anyway. So by the end of the book, he actually ends up as one of the only survivors of the entire war. Because this war, the book is called The Forever War, and the war goes on for about 1,200 years, something like that. And over the course of the entire war, he fights in 4 battles. Yeah, because, this is the point. He spends most of the time pootling backwards and forwards between stars, and as a result, an awful lot of time passes between each battle. But it's a very interesting book because a lot of it is based on the author's own experiences during the Vietnam War. So there's, it's. I'll freely admit, I am a big fan of military science fiction, and you tend to find the most interesting military SF is often written by people who have a certain amount of military experience themselves. So it's the classic. There are basically two modes in war. There is bored senseless, and there is scared senseless, and there's kind of nothing in between. You're either bored waiting for something to happen, or it's actually happening, and then all you can do is be scared and just try and get through it alive. And because of the whole time dilation thing, it's interesting that the alien technology advances an awful lot, and so does theirs. So their power armor initially is very tough, but it's still you get a breach in your suit and you're dead. The later variants have sort of safety features, which is things like if you get a rip in the arm, a seal will implement somewhere around the elbow that will basically cut off your arm completely at the elbow, but the suit will seal safely. So you'll lose the arm, but you will, you'll make it through to the end of the battle. Which is it's a logical if unpleasant feature. And it actually ends up happening to the main character. He loses an arm. I think it's an arm. I can't remember. Does he lose an arm and his girlfriend loses a leg, or is it he loses a leg and his girlfriend loses an arm? Whichever way around it is. But by the time he gets back home, they've actually developed the technology to grow him a new arm. They basically stick a sort of metal replacement bone or a metal skeleton here, and then they basically grow extra muscle over it and over his hand and extra skin and everything else. Which obviously, and that technology wasn't available when he first left home. The book lists basically the initial starting date of the war in sometime in the late 90s, because it was written pretty much during... actually, I think it was pretty much written while the Vietnam War was still going on. Because while he was trying to get it published, he did have problems, because a lot of people basically said, we are not publishing this book about the Vietnam War. Because it was, it wears its influences very much on its sleeve, and that's fine. But it's one of the most interesting science fiction books I think you will read, because it's also interesting to see the cultural changes that that take place on Earth. So, for example, population control, or the population starts to get really out of hand in terms of sheer numbers. So homosexuality actually becomes more and more socially acceptable, and by the end of the book, it's actually, it's heterosexual people who are considered the sexual deviants. So it basically goes over. So over the course of 1,000 years, it becomes this complete reversal. By the time because he gets promoted a lot over the course of the book, he starts off as Private Mandela, and by the end of it, he's Major Mandela. And the last segment, he's actually in command of his own company, and his men refer to him as the Old Queer, because he's straight, and all of them are gay. As a result of, effectively, the government highly, highly, highly encourages homosexuality as a means of population control. And, after a constant war that's been going on for 1,000 years, the government is very, very powerful, because they're constantly clamping down on everything. Because the thing is, they don't even need to... It's not like they need to worry about spies or anything like that, or traitors, because, a tyrant sees a human, they try to kill them, and vice versa. And, of course, it eventually transpires that what caused this war? A mistake. When they, it takes them 1,000 years to figure out how to talk to the aliens, and when they finally do, the first question is, why did you start this war? To which their response is, us? You started this war! And it basically transpires that some colonists saw the Tauran ship coming for them and panicked. And this entire 1,000-year war, millions upon billions of people killed, completely bloody pointless. And I'll freely admit, it's kind of like Starship Troopers in a lot of ways, but on the exact opposite end of the scale. Because Starship Troopers, which, for the record, I've also got a copy of over here, another very interesting read, I would say. Starship Troopers is very pro-war. Forever War is very, anti-war. And incidentally, if you've only ever seen the film version of Starship Troopers, I do recommend reading the book. While I dub it the Little Book of Fascism, it's actually a very interesting read. Is what I will say. that's the thing. I don't always have to agree with the political views of the thing I'm reading in order to find it interesting. And Starship Troopers is very interesting. But it's very... they have a lot in common just from complete opposite ends of the pro-war, anti-war side. And I do strongly recommend you read it. It's a... they are both very interesting, very fascinating books. But... yeah, because the themes of the Forever War really are... it's the classic case of how do you come back from war when everything seems to have changed? And while it's... it takes it a little more... Normally the attitude is that the world hasn't changed, you have. When you get soldiers coming back from war, and yes, they have changed significantly, because of course they have. This takes it a little more literally, because it's got the time dilation effect, but I'll freely admit, I love time dilation as a concept. I can list the formula for time dilation off the top of my head, and that's not just because I have a maths degree, and one of the... let's face it, my final year project when I did my maths degree was titled Rocket to the Stars, and a decent chunk of that was about the effects of time dilation on long-distance spaceflight. But it's a fascinating concept, and it's a very good, very interesting book that I do strongly recommend you read. So yeah, The Forever War by Joe Haldeman. Go read it, check it out. It's a good read. You'll enjoy it, providing you're not offended by an awful lot of swearing, as in to the point where I just want to count how long it is before. Yep, it's about 4 or 5 paragraphs before we actually get the first swear word. Yep, there it is. Second page. Took me a while to find it, but yeah. So yeah, if you're not offended by an awful lot of uses of the F word, you'll find it a very interesting read, and I do strongly recommend it. So yeah, I think that's all I've got to say. So yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in future videos.